And welcome to everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Cook County Board of Commissioners regular meeting. This is our morning session today. We have a lot of agenda items, and we'll begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So this morning, do we have any adjustments or changes to our agenda? Any adjustments or changes? I do have one that has come from Soil and Water, and this would be item G under consent. It is to authorize the board chair to write a letter of support for their application to the Minnesota Lake Superior Coastal Program for a grant to assist with the cost of the Army Corps of Engineers work to study East Bay to look for solutions to our coastal issues.
Go ahead.
And so we'll add that to the consent agenda, and if there are questions or concerns, we can pull that item and discuss further.
Well, yeah, I am very uncomfortable putting something on the consent agenda that we have not seen. Not saying I don't support,
Right.
but I think it's more appropriate to add that to our regular agenda so there can be discussion
Yeah,
and explanation of this.
so we'll
Okay.
we will do that. We will pull that and put it elsewhere. But it came in late, and because of power issues and internet issues, we are not able to get it at a later time. All right, so we'll add that and deal with that as it comes. Any other additions or changes to our agenda this morning? If not, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner White. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right. We'll move on now to our public comment period, and this is an opportunity for citizens to appear before the county board. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak?
I would like to.
Good morning.
Good morning.
If those individuals who are speaking today would remember to sign in, please. And then when you are seated and get ready to speak into the microphone, speak clearly so that everybody, both here in the room and online, can hear, and make sure to state your name and address for the public record. And if you'd please sit down.
Do I have to sit?
Yeah, it makes it easier for the microphone to pick up.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay. My name's Steve Watson. I live at 1517 Devil Track Road in District 4. Anyway, I came and spoke last time at the meeting, and 5 minutes isn't near enough, so I don't know how many times I'll be here. I wanted to start out with that I had no idea what was happening in our county and all the things that have happened, but that I addressed you, that you five are the ones responsible for the county. So my encouragement to you is to not hire an administrator, and because you guys were elected to the position. And then I actually said to you that if you need an administrator, the salary for that person should come out of your wages, not the public's. Because it's your job, and if you want to pass it to them, you should finance that, okay? But that it wasn't a coincidence that I came and did that. It didn't just happen out of the blue. You'll have to figure, why that actually happened, that I would come on that day and address that issue to you people. The other thing I want to say, I also said that the finances of this community is run by greed, and greed says never enough. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So 2 years ago, I think there was a little bit extra levy leveraged against us, the people, to make sure there was enough money to pay back the government if in lieu of tax money, you had to pay that money back. And now this year, 2 years later, you don't have to pay that money back. I think it's 2.14 million that you have that you don't have to pay back. And then I think they increased the amount of money in lieu of taxes that you actually got. The next thing that has happened, for 2 years, you've increased the property value of everybody in the county, so you're going to get extra money for that. And for 2 years, there's been a lot of building. Lots of raw land now have houses that weren't there before, so you get all the increase of that. And to me, then to set a preliminary levy at 10 is despicable. You should be able to get it to 0. You already have all that increase. And so that's the first thing I wanted to say. Now I want to talk about hiring. And I have some questions, and I know you won't answer, so I'll answer them for you. How many of you commissioners have a cook at home? Somebody that cooks on your payroll, your home payroll. How about a baker, a maid, a gardener? Any other, like a mechanic in your garage? Wouldn't your life be so much better and easier if you had all that at home and you didn't have to take care of any of that? So why don't you have it? Why aren't those people all on your payroll? Because you can't afford it. And the same principle is for the county. You have a whole bunch of people on your payroll that probably are good people, make everything go better, but they shouldn't have been hired because you couldn't afford them. And that's why you're struggling with your levy. Now I want to talk about what came out in the paper. And you specifically talked about it on WTIP when you were debating Dean, that you actually found counties that you compared to so that you could raise the wages of the people in this county. I'm sure everybody who works here is happy, but so this is what happens when you raise our levy. We don't just have to make the money to pay your levy. We have to make the money to pay the federal government on the money we made, and the state government, and the FICA. That's all piled on that one bill. And it doesn't seem like you care about us at all, the people who live here. Wise decisions. Some of these things are just wants. They're not needs.
So, Mr. Watson, about 1 minute left.
Okay. So anyway, when you compare counties, there aren't any counties in Minnesota that have less than 10% private property and with less than 8,000 people in the county. There aren't. You couldn't have compared. So you had to take other things to compare to. It doesn't work out as soon as you cut the pie. When
So,
you
Mr.
cut the
Watson, if
pie,
you'd conclude your comments, please.
thank you for interfering me. It doesn't cut the pie. When you cut the pie, we get a big chunk. Those other counties get a little chunk. And you need to think about that, and you should have compared to Baudette, and then you would have reduced the amount of money that you were paying, because that's about as close of a county you could have compared to. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public that wish to speak this morning? Any other members? Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
Good.
Not the wind, thank goodness.
If you could state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, my name is Joan Farnham, 17 3rd Avenue West in Grand Marais. I'm just here to urge you to vote for continuing the county administrator position. I think it's really helped our county a lot over the last few years, and it's efficient. It means that you, as the county board, can have the time and attention to take care of your constituents, as well as go to all those committee meetings and all those boards you're on. And the county administrator takes care of the day by day. And there's that. The other thing that I think is really important is that Minnesota counties, there are a majority of Minnesota counties use a county administrator. And I think the reason they do is because it works so well. And I think in our case, it really has. I've certainly seen, I guess the most exciting thing for me was this summer when I was working in my community garden. I noticed they were putting a new roof on the community center. And it was just, they're fixing these buildings. Yay! And I think part of that is because of the work that James Yorkie has been doing. And I want to say that. Let's see what else I want to say. I think a county administrator keeps politics out of the day-by-day administration. I think that's really important for us and for the community at large. Let's see. And I think it will help your work as well as help the county. So I urge you, when you have a chance, to vote for the continuation of the county administrator. And I would like to say that we're really going to miss Jamie Yorkie, and he has done such an incredible job here. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public that wish to speak this morning?
Good morning.
Morning.
Gary Gamble, 11 East 3rd Street, and I'm not here to accelerate the transition, as I appreciate Commissioner Johnson's work on behalf of our constituents. But I did want to bring before the board information relative to decisions that are forthcoming, and you may or may not be aware of this information. This information is taken from Research Department, Minnesota House of Representatives. It's an information brief that was published in 2014. And then there is the Association of Minnesota Counties County Government Structure Publication, which was updated 2021. And much of this information is drawn from Minnesota statutes, which is current. And I'll read this information. Beginning in 1918, under Minnesota statutes, each county must have an elected county auditor, treasurer, sheriff, recorder, attorney, and coroner. Since 1973, however, Minnesota statute has allowed a county to appoint a county auditor, county treasurer, sheriff, or county recorder, if the offices have not been abolished by the adoption of other options. The positions of county sheriff, county attorney, and watershed district directors, as well as the governing body of commissioners, however, continue to be elective positions, a position that is filled by the people who are elected by the citizens. It is not given by appointment or inheritance. Options to appoint may be adopted only after the voters in the county approve it in a referendum. Minnesota's statute details that the referendum may be initiated by a resolution of the county board, A petition signed by voters equal in number to 5% of the electors voting at the last election for the office of governor, or a recommendation of a county government study commission. And it goes on to define what that means and what the timeline is on that. Until the adoption of any one or more of the options stated, each county shall operate under the plan of county government relating to the county offices enumerated in this section, which was in effect for that county on July 1st, 1973. So as I understand it, there are two instances in which appointments are made. One is in the instance of a vacancy, and the other is an incident where, as we did in Brady's position as auditor treasurer, we went through a process so that that position would be a combined position. And so an appointment that is made to make a permanent determination, as we did in the case of our auditor treasurer, is different than an appointment that takes place when there is a vacancy. So in the case of a temporary appointment to fill vacancies, state statute says when a vacancy occurs in the office of an elected county auditor, county treasurer, county recorder, sheriff, county attorney, county supervisor, or coroner, the county board must fill it by appointment at a regular or special meeting. A person appointed to a vacancy pursuant to this paragraph must give the board or give the bond and take the oath required by law and serve the remainder of the term and until a successor qualifies. When a vacancy occurs in an office that has a chief deputy or first assistant, the chief deputy or first assistant may perform all the duties and functions of the office until it is filled by appointment by the county board. As an alternative to the appointment procedure provided in section of the state statute, a vacancy in the office of sheriff or county attorney may be filled at a special election as provided in this section, and it goes on to define that. The county board can also set the appointee's annual salary for the remainder of the year at an amount less than was set for that year. So my understanding, based upon state statute, which Molly may be aware of, and you may be aware of as well, is that in the case where we're filling a vacancy, we can make that appointment, and in talking to Brady about this issue, that appointment would fulfill the term of the individual that we are filling the position for. And then after that, it would go back to the electorate to make that choice, because that is the form of governance that we have set up. If we choose to go to a permanent appointment in the future, we need to go through a state statute-directed process in order to make that position in the future appointed and not elected. The other thing I'd like to touch on is the issue of the county administrator. I was part of the process in transitioning from our form of governance to the county administrator form of governance. We went through quite an extensive process in doing that. And we had interviews with counties that had county administrators. We had research that we conducted, considerable research and interviews, and we've had 10 years now to observe that form of governance. There are 5 other forms of governments that could be looked at. We have a unique opportunity to step back and pause, evaluate the effectiveness of county government, form of government, to ascertain its efficiencies, its financial advantages, its contributions to the culture of the county's workforce. In addition, if we look at other options, we can weigh pluses and minuses. I had held a town hall relative to county administrator so that people could come in and ask the question that were not familiar with this form of government, as it was unique to Cook County at the time. And at that point, the number one concern was, will it save us money? Will it contribute to efficiencies? Whenever you venture into something that you have not heretofore experienced, you usually stop and evaluate and find out if your expectations have been met. So my encouragement is that we have a unique opportunity to evaluate, to assess honestly how this has worked for us as a community. And there are tangible things that are black and white that we can measure that will answer that question for us. And I encourage that we do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there other members of the public that wish to speak this morning? Any other members of the public that wish to speak? Have commissioners received any items that should be read for the record?
Madam Chair, I have, but it's about our topic, the bridge, and so I'd like to wait until then.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Anything else? All right, we'll close our public comment session at this point and move into our consent. A few people arrived a bit late. We did add an item G, which is to authorize the board chair to write a letter of support for the Soil and Water Conservation District's application to the Lake Superior Coastal Program for a grant related to East Bay.
Madam Chair, wasn't that taken off the consent agenda and added onto the regular agenda, though?
Not that I'm aware of.
Oh, okay.
We were attempting to do that, but. So
But
is there
my
someone that would like to pull an item?
Well, my understanding is that we're going to be talking about that in this meeting now, to have full discussion about that. So why, I agree with you, Mal, like
So let's just pull it and make it a separate item.
Yes.
And let's put it in front of oath of office. All right, thank you. All right, so our consent agenda as written, letters A through F, is there a motion to approve?
Also move.
Thank you, Commissioner White. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
All right.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, to address the additional item that we pulled off the consent agenda, we have Stephen Janessi here from Soil and Water Conservation District. And we received information to add this to our agenda rather late on Friday after things had been published. So we appreciate you making time to be here, Stephen, so you can talk about this.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for making time for me this morning. I appreciate it. We're moving rather quickly on this, and so I apologize getting it in front of you on such short notice. But by way of background, the City of Grand Marais and our organization have both received communication from landowners along the East Bay of Grand Marais over the last several years about issues that they're facing, primarily driven by wave action on the East Bay. The East Bay, the way that it's oriented geographically, there's an issue there with what's called fetch. There's a long, unbroken area going to the northeast across the lake where there are no landforms that really block the interaction between wind and waves all the way from the East Bay of Grand Marais up until the north side of the lake in Canada, which means that that particular area has a huge potential for large waves. Particularly in winter storm events, we get those waves. And in some instances, those waves are actually breaking up against some of the properties that are along the East Bay under extreme circumstances. It's an annual thing for landowners there. After the winter season is over, to have to remove gravel and aggregate from their buildings because of the fact that the waves are interacting with the first stories of their buildings in this way. And so they approached the city and they approached us to see if there was any sort of solution that we could come up with the issue that they are facing. We started working, well, I specifically started working with the city on this problem a little over a year ago. We identified pretty early on that the best thing for us to do is to get a coastal engineer on site who can do a prolonged study to understand the actual dynamics of the wave action in the East Bay before we start coming up with any sort of a design solution. We really need to understand what the problem is before we can design something. In the process of that, I started looking around for funding opportunities, reached out to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to see if they had any grants coming up. And they didn't have a grant to offer to me, but they informed me of what's called their Public Assistance to States program, which is designed for government units of varying sizes who are facing issues like this. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is willing to offer up their resources and in some instances cover 50% of the total cost, in some cases cover 100% of the total cost. In this situation, what they are proposing is an 18-month study of East Bay Grand Marais, using their engineers, using their resources, The estimate on that study is not low. It's probably going to cost somewhere in the area of $543,000. So this is a very expensive thing for us to do. It's also, in my opinion, necessary for us to do this to really understand the problem. Under the Public Assistance to States program, as it stands right now, the Army Corps is going to cover 50% of that project. We believe in the Soil and Water Office that we have a potential source for an additional 25% of the project, which means that we're looking now to cover about $135,000 of the total cost of the project. And we're aggressively pursuing grants in order to find a funding option for that. This annual grant opportunity with the Minnesota Lake Superior Coastal Program came up. It has a very quick turnaround. We have a deadline of getting an application submitted by November 17th. One of the things that the Lake Superior Coastal Program specifically called out for were letters of support for the endeavor, and we'd be delighted to have the County Board of Commissioners submit a letter of support. So again, I apologize for bringing this to you so quickly and getting myself on the agenda kind of outside of normal protocol, and I have deep appreciation for you allowing me to speak to you about this today. I think that gives you a sense of what we're talking about. Does anybody have any specific questions that I can answer for you? Yeah.
Commissioner White.
I'm well aware of this because I sit on the Lake Superior One Watershed, one plan committee. And could you explain, well, why don't we just put in boulders or just some sort of thing along the shore? And what happens with that? I know that doesn't work, but could you explain, because it seems like we'll just do that. We'll pile up a lot of rocks and it will all be good. Explain what happened in the past.
Sure, I will do my best with that, bearing in mind that I am not a coastal engineer, and I haven't studied the East Bay. But I think folks who have an understanding of the history of this place understand why that might not be the best path forward, because the truth is those types of efforts have been done in the past along the East Bay. We've seen wall structures get torn out. You can still see the remnants of some of them along the East Bay. There are large rocks that have been brought in the past. Because there's such a deep reservoir of cobble along the East Bay, what tends to happen over time is this is a very dynamic beach. So if you spend any time there, you see this. The size of the beach is constantly shifting relative to what lake levels are and what the current weather conditions are. And when you place those large stones along the coast, what happens is because this cobble is moving in and out, they slowly start to sink. So some of the largest stones that we've put along East Bay in the past 30, 40 years are now fairly well buried underneath the cobble, and they'll occasionally emerge depending on what the weather events are going. So not necessarily the most effective solution. We are just trying to get a sense of what the full range of possibilities are, and some of those solutions might be onshore. It might be something similar to that, though anchored in a slightly different way. There's a possibility that we could be talking about offshore breakwaters. That's something the Army Corps has mentioned. But I think in this situation, like all situations, this is a big decision. East Bay is a really important resource to this community and to this county. We don't want to go towards the first solution that comes to mind. We want to be very intentional about collecting as much information as we possibly can and feeling confident in whatever decision that we make for the East Bay. I think that that's really important. I've been stressing that to the city. I've been stressing that to landowners. I don't want to see a situation where we make a mistake here and the East Bay of Grand Marais is no longer what it is now, because I know it's a deeply meaningful thing to residents here and to visitors here alike, and certainly to the business owners of downtown Grand Marais.
Other questions? Commissioner Storley.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. So all you're asking for really is a letter of support to be sent to whom by the 17th?
So the letter of support will be to the Minnesota Lake Superior Coastal Program. I can certainly pass along additional information about what the format of that will look like. I don't know, Commissioner Sullivan, is that okay for that to go through you?
That's certainly
is. We'll get that to you in short order. I know we've got a tight turnaround here, but it really is just a letter saying that you're cognizant of the issues along East Bay. It's an issue of concern for both the city and the county, and that you're supportive of our endeavors to try to come up with solutions for our landowners here in the area.
And it's a letter of support, it is not a financial commitment.
That's absolutely correct.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you for showing up this morning. First of all, we have to have the letter in by November 17th deadline. When is the award? When would we hear if the award?
It's an annual grant opportunity. I have to confess, this is my first time applying for something with the coastal program, so I'm not sure of the precise turnaround. So I don't have an answer to your question. Many times with these grant applications, it's several months before you hear something back. So I would anticipate somewhere in early 2025, we would know.
And I want to express my appreciation that you're reaching out and trying to figure out this problem, because I've known this has been an issue for years. I've attended different meetings. This has been discussed, and I'm glad it hasn't dropped off the radar, and we're still working on that. I'm just going to, the rest of my comments are going to be about process here. If we knew this didn't make the agenda on a Friday, I personally would have appreciated a heads up, instead of walking in here and discovering it after 8:30 in the morning that this was going to be added to the agenda. I get maybe not all the paperwork came in, but we send each other information all the time. It doesn't necessarily have to make it here. All you needed to do was keep us in the loop that this was coming up. Hey, something new might get talked about. Okay, so not against the or about the program, not against the letter of support. I'm concerned with the processes here. So, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right. With that, is there a motion to allow me to write a letter of support supporting the grant application by Soil and Water for the East Bay Coastal Program?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion, so move.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. Is there support?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Commissioner White. We have a motion and support. Anything further? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming in.
thank you for the time this morning again.
We appreciate it. All right. We'll move on to item 4 right now, which is our oath of office for our assessor and recorder. And what I'll do is put a microphone right here if you want to get a little bit closer.
Yeah, if I could have you both raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do swear and affirm. That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of Minnesota.
And the Constitution of the State of Minnesota.
And that I will be diligent, faithful, and impartial.
And that I will be diligent, faithful, and impartial.
In the performance of the duties of the office.
In the performance of the duties of the office.
For which I have been appointed.
For which I have been appointed.
For the County of Cook.
For the County of Cook.
In the State of Minnesota.
In the State of Minnesota.
To the best of my judgment and ability.
To the best of my judgment and ability.
In accordance with the law.
In accordance with the law.
Congratulations to you both.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I'm not a notary. Are you a notary? Okay, I could take it to the auditor's office. Okay.
All right, because they need to be signed.
Okay. Okay. I'll do that right now. Yeah, do you want to do that?
I'm a notary. Oh, she can do it right over here.
She doesn't have her stamp with her.
Oh, you don't have your stamp.
I can stamp it
You
out.
can stamp it later. Okay, so they just need to each sign their own.
Well, at this point in time, we're running just a little bit late. We're going to begin our public hearing, which is to consider increases for county fees. And Auditor Treasurer Powers, is there anything that you'd like to say as we kind of introduce this item?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So the board can change these fees after the public hearing takes place, and I'll just describe generally. The Highway Department has one request to change the Spornet Service District administrative fee from $1,200 to $2,100 due to the time on these projects through the MIS office and auditor's office. And the Sheriff's Department would like to change fees for registering and inspecting for dangerous dogs as per the ordinance, $500, and reduce the fee for the PBT test from $10 to $5. And then I will not go through all of the rest that Land Services has a large list of fees. I think there's too many to go through, but for all their departments 390 and 394. Land use permits, inspections, septic systems, so forth. Vacation rental, license fees, variances, appeals, wetlands applications, etc. So, too many to list.
All right. Well, are there any members of the public that wish to speak about the increases to county fees this morning? Anyone from the public who wishes to speak? If not, we will close, Commissioner White.
I'm not the public.
All right. If not, we'll close the comments to the public and give commissioners an opportunity to speak. Commissioner White.
I just have a question where it says vacation rental renewal. Vacation rental annual license is, wait, no, where am I here? No, I lost my spot. Variances of appeal. Oh, now I don't even know what I was
Right
looking.
here you're looking, but it says late renewal.
Late renewal, okay. Late renewal fees are $1,200, current fee is $300, and we're going to $1,200. And there's no difference with, what's the difference between a late renewal fee and an after-the-fact renewal fee?
Neva, if you'd like to come forward on behalf of Tim Nelson. Neva Maxwell is here today to respond to any questions regarding land services fees.
Can I
Thank you
just-
for being here.
Yeah, could I just point out that the current fee is $300 and the proposed fee is $500. Different column. I think the $1,200
Yeah.
is the,
Oh, the revenue.
yeah.
All right, Neva.
Thank you. So the vacation rental is an annual license, and so the vacation rental license holder has a period of time to renew that license for the next year. And if they miss that deadline, then that's where the late renewal fee would kick in. So it was a previously licensed vacation rental unit, is just they missed the deadline on the renewal. And then the after the fact is somebody just never even bothered doing licensing. And so that's where, oh, it's come to our attention that you're operating a vacation rental, the after-the-fact fee will apply. So those are fees that get added onto the annual license. And that's the way a lot of our fees are structured. So, so like the variance fee, you do the base fee plus the after-the-fact.
Understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Neva. Commissioner Johnson.
And may I ask about the variance fees? And wondering why the after the fact has been eliminated.
We didn't eliminate the after the fact. It is a little bit confusing on here. Very reasonable question. What we're proposing to do is remove the square footage after the fact fee for variances and only apply a base after the fact general, the very last line on that variance section, because there's different types of variances. Some are for square footage of structure, but a person could ask for a variance from any ordinance criteria. So that's, generally speaking, what that's proposing to do. It would simplify,
Okay.
frankly.
So it's just a base rate regardless how big.
Correct.
Of a-
And kind of the follow-up to that is, say a person does get an after-the-fact variance approval, then the square footage fee would be applied to the land use permit later on. So there is still a difference if a
All
person
right.
has like a little cabin versus a super large structure.
Thank you for explaining that. My other question, I guess, was about the dog ordinance and who pays that? And how do we collect that money? Brady, do you have?
No idea.
The dangerous dog ordinance?
Yeah.
Who pays what?
So we have a $500 dog fee. Is that the dog owner?
That's
And-
if there is a dangerous dog designated, the owner has to pay a $500 registration fee each year. And what that covers is the cost of enforcing the ordinance. So the deputy going out to the person's home, making sure they have the enclosure and all of the signage, and they have the dog tag, and the sheriff's office also purchases all of the dog tags and signs to distribute to people with dangerous dogs.
I didn't even know that. So how many
Yeah.
dangerous dogs do we have in Cook County?
I think we have one.
Okay. All right, thank you for that clarification.
Other questions?
Yes, so what's
PBT?
yes. This is from the Sheriff's Department, reduce the
Preliminary.
PBT test from $10 to $5.
Preliminary breath test for alcohol,
Oh.
blood alcohol concentration.
Okay.
Other questions? If not, is there a motion to approve the fee increases?
Changes, maybe you want to say.
Changes, all right.
Because there's one.
Because there is one that went down. Thank you for pointing that out.
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Is there support?
Support?
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor? Aye.
All right.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, as we move on, we're going to be talking a little bit with some members of our EDA, and we have a couple microphones here, so we'd ask some of our EDA, well, I see we have Mr. Hedstrom here coming forward to speak, but we're going to talk a little bit about the potential sale of Superior National Golf Course. Good morning.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, good morning. Thank you for having us on the agenda and listening to us. Little background, I'm here with Peter Glishold. Both Peter and I are on the EDA. Mike Larson from Superior National, he's the one that wrote the report that was presented or in your packet last meeting or before that. Hope you've had a chance to kind of look through that. This is kind of a summary of all that. The golf course was kind of instituted, installed in 1992. So it's been around a long time. The EDA done a number of improvements over the years. There's still some bond payments for those improvements outstanding. It is a destination golf course, which puts it in a little higher level of category of golf course. It is on par with the better courses in the state. Fee structure is very similar to Giants Ridge, for instance. The report that you were presented talks about the challenges moving forward. One is staffing. Upon the retirement of Scott Harrison, who kind of was a de facto manager there, his baby ran it for years with no pay, and Mike is doing a good job now, but when Scott retired, it threw a lot of work back on the EDA director. We didn't really realize that, how big a job Scott was doing. It really shows how understaffed we are in the critical areas, managers and HR, all kinds of stuff. as a destination golf course and as any asset, very similar to the shoreline talk you've got, we're right on the Poplar River, there's erosion and capital is going to be needed for that, plus infrastructure, plus equipment, plus clubhouse. The estimate is $12 million. So we're looking at that, looking at the load on the EDA, looking at the capital needs, looking at the hiring needs. We kind of, and it was in Mike's report too, what do we do? How do we go forward? And one of those routes is to look at selling the golf course to a private enterprise. And, we'd have to pay off the bonds. We can then, if we did that, we could refocus the efforts of EDA on what we do best, and that's economic development. In private hands, it would add that property to tax rolls. And if we had a new owner, who knows who it's going to be, but, somebody in the golf business, recreation business, whoever, we would assume that they could leverage their own management staff, HR, other staffing needs, to really run the golf course as it should be run. Private enterprise is always more fleet of foot than government. Any decision now has to be thought about at the manager level at the golf course, go through the golf course board of governors, go through the EDA, and by the time all that process is done, maybe that opportunity is lost. So, being fleet of foot is much better than being in government. Our board has been talking about this for the last few months, and we haven't, I don't think, voted, but I think we're pretty unanimous in this is a route that we ought to pursue. We got the opinion of council about, okay, what is this process? And one of the processes to get the approval of the county board to enter into the thought and discussions about a sale. So that's why we are here today. The ask would be a resolution, allowing us to move ahead. In saying that, there's many steps ahead. I mean, there would have to be a public process, public input. We would have many steps within the EDA, plus I don't know, do we have to come back here, Mike, for final approval? Probably. So it's just a first step, but in order for us to take that first step and move ahead, we'd like a resolution from the board, allowing us to kind of move forward with the idea of a sale of the golf course. Happy to take any questions.
Commissioner Sterling.
Thank you. Thanks again so much to all of you that have been working so hard on this. I know it's a hard decision to make, but I do have a couple of questions. Where do you find a realtor, who can work with, 328 acres, is it? About that, and then what's already there? So a realtor would be important, and then do you have a lawyer to also help you along?
We're working with, is it? Fred Dutterer.
Fred, okay.
Yeah, so he's gray hairs, but, he goes back to the beginning of the golf course. It's kind of ironic, my uncle Wes Hedstrom was on the county board at the time that the golf course started and was instrumental in it becoming, destination golf course. So here I am, next generation trying to sell it. But anyway, that's the evolution. And my goal, and I think the goal of the EDA board, is to have Superior National a successful destination golf course and do the things that it has been doing these last years in giving one more attribute to tourism plus the locals, and that would be our goal moving forward. And a sale is structuring a sale and finding a buyer that will continue and look at making that a successful golf course. And to the point of how do you value, how do you sell it, this is the first step. So, I mean, we have talked about some things, but now, you know, if we can get a resolution and you concur, then we'll really sit down in earnest and work on those items.
And just so the county board is aware, there are real estate groups that have been looking already at Superior National. I had a call from Florida, from Steve Ikovich of Leisure Investment Properties. They scour the internet, they're looking for golf courses and different kinds of resort properties. And so there is interest, and there will be a number of contacts, I'm sure, that will be made once a decision is made to actually pursue the sale. Commissioner White.
Is there a outside entity that actually knows how to give a price? I mean, what is the value of this golf course?
Well, the value would be having 2 or more buyers compete on the sale.
But where do you set the starting price? That's the question. Who sets it?
I don't know if there is a starting price. I mean, we would look at offers and look at the best one. I mean, the success of the golf course, I mean, you could value it at $100 million, but that won't assure the success of the golf course. I mean, to be frank, I mean, we have broke even, you know, in the whole life of the golf course, you know, plus being supported by bonds and a lot of grants. So it's not a highly profitable venture, but an important one for the county. So you know, I am hoping, I don't know if we've looked at that as a board or a group yet, but, you know, I am hoping that the potential buyers would value the property for us.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I have a question, a resolution versus motion. And I thought this morning you were going to come and, I agree, we need to do this. Don't get me wrong. But for us to give the authority for you to go to the next level and do the work, figure out what will work, then come back to us for a resolution saying, yep, we approve this sale. So, because in here, we have to make sure that the county, the bonds that are owed to the county are covered. So I'm a little uncomfortable saying, yes, go sell the county to or the court. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding what it is we're being asked this morning. So I see the attorney has information.
Absolutely. Attorney Hicken.
Well, I just a preliminary question, just to make sure I understand what you're looking for. It sounds like, you know, finding a buyer, valuing the property, all of these things, there's going to be a lot of work on the part of the EDA, and you're going to incur legal fees, et cetera. So it sounds like what you may be looking for, Mr. Hedstrom, is just kind of the consensus of the board that, yes, we're interested in you moving forward with this at this point. You're not looking for a commitment to sell for a certain price to a certain seller or anything like that.
Okay.
Is my understanding correct?
Mike, I don't have the Dutter's letter in front of me, but it's one of the steps that Fred Dutter laid out is, you know, because of the structure, you know, we are EDA, but we're under the county board, you might say, so we want to have your concurrence. You know, in my mind, it was a resolution for us to move forward. If it's just a consensus of the board, if that's what you want to do, I don't know if that would be. We just don't want to go down the road and then come back here and say, well, we didn't know about this, we're not in favor of that. So
right.
Whatever vehicle gets us there, I think we're okay, Mike.
What was requested for the agenda is just an authorization for the EDA board to pursue the sale.
And that's what I understood, and then I hear the word resolution, and there's no resolution included in my
Right.
board
Okay.
packet.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned, so I just want to clarify, I am in support of letting the EDA move forward,
Okay.
in my opinion, but
Whatever vehicle you
Yeah,
want.
typically what we would do is provide the minutes that would say that this body authorized it, and the vote would be in there.
All right,
Okay.
that would be acceptable.
Other questions or comments? If not, is there a motion to authorize the Cook County Grand Marais Joint Economic Development Authority Board to pursue the sale of Superior National Golf Course?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Well done, thank you.
Thank you so much. And we have our highway engineer here, Robbie Hass, to talk about a final payment request.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, so in front of you is a final pay request for a project we did this last summer, the Alfred Creek Bridge over the aptly named Alfred Creek, County Road 28 down there. I guess, does anyone have any questions about it? We had some overages on the project, like any project. Wasn't anything alarming, just some higher than anticipated costs, that's all. But happy to entertain any questions.
Questions by commissioners?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to accept the work as complete and approve the final payment in the amount of $174,510.72 to Northland Constructors of Duluth Matthey Construction Company.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
Madam Chair, I support. Good job.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Item 8 on our agenda today is facilities, and we have Brooke Lassard, our facilities director, here this morning. Thank you for coming to provide us with some updates about roofing to begin with.
Yes, there was a claim for wind damage on the 4-H building roof, and I've sent that out to bid, and just looking to award LaMoore Roofing the bid on that one.
Questions that commissioners have? Commissioner?
More for
White.
the public then. Does insurance pay for part of this?
Yes, insurance covered approximately 13,000 of that, and then we're making up the difference.
And the bid amount is, just for those that are not reading?
$17,654.25.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Mills?
Any further thoughts on the insulating part of it?
Yes, I went through the facility yesterday with LaFreniere Brothers, and the insulating, you'd have to build up the roof on the top, and with the dormers, it wouldn't work properly. And because there is zero insulation in it, you can see the underneath of the roof decking from inside the building. The best route would be to do a build-up, do a spray foam on the inside, and then do a tongue and groove to cover the spray foam up, to keep the same look and the kind of the spirit of the building the way it is. That would be the best route to go. To get any actual R value, it'd need a 2 to 6 inch buildup, and then it would cover bottoms of windows on the dormers, and it just wouldn't work properly.
Thank you.
Thank you for exploring that.
What's the depth of this spray foam that they're considering?
That was just a question Commissioner Mills had in the building committee. We are not going to pursue that yet. That would be, I'd have to go out to bid, figure some things out, and figure out what depth we would need to reach a proper R value. That would be, so that was just a question that I pursued, just in case we wanted to look at it on the roof deck itself, and that's not going to be an option. So we're just going to go with a re-roof for now, and then if it's something we wish to pursue, then I'll look at getting some bids and looking at how we would do the insulation from the inside.
So at what point down the line do we do something like this? And what are the additional energy costs in that interim of having an uninsulated roof?
Well, it'd be basically the same cost we've been incurring for the life of the building. It's never been insulated. So, yes, it's something we need to look at if it's a full year-round use building, but haven't done the research on what we're spending to heat it and what the usage is on it.
And I think that would be important, and then it goes on to the deferred maintenance list, and it needs to be evaluated as to its importance, where it is on that list.
Right. It is currently not on the list. And I mean, if we were going to go that route, we'd want to look at getting underneath the crawl space and assessing if there's any insulation under there as well. It'd kind of be in a whole entire envelope assessment of the 4-H building.
Good question. Other questions or comments? Commissioner White?
So when do you think you might do that? The assessment. It's a little late in this season, I
Yeah,
understand that.
it'd be a good, over this season, it'd be a good time to evaluate and do the research. And then it'd be probably a spring project to most efficient time to spray foam.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? If not, is there a motion to award Lafreniere Roofing with the tariff on and replacement of the roof located at our community center at the log building?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner White. Is there support?
Support?
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And now on to vehicles.
Yes, so I have kind of come into this 2017 F-350. The issues were before my time here. But this is the Recycle Center's tow truck that goes up and down the Gunflint, west and east. There was an issue with the fuel system, contaminated with gasoline. Currently, we have $6,401.20 of repairs owed to Northern Truck and Trailer. And that was just to get the fuel system back in order so we could assess the other issues that happened with the contaminated fuel. And we're looking at anywhere from an additional $6,000 to $12,000 once he gets the complete motor torn apart to assess all the damage and get it back on the road. And being it a 2007 with 150,000 miles and a lot of money already invested in it that hasn't gone well, my recommendation is to sell the vehicle to Northern Truck and Trailer. He will then cut our invoice in half, and we will basically be paying $3,200.60 to get rid of the vehicle.
Commissioner White.
And when you, excuse me, when you say sell it, does that mean we're putting a price tag on it, or we're selling it for $3,000?
We are paying $3,000. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yep, I asked Brady for guidance on this, and anything under $15,000 does not have to go to public auction, can be sold at the will of the commissioners.
And I think we would be correct in saying the history of this vehicle, most of us would call it a lemon.
Yeah, it's not been a good history. There's a lot of transmission, motor, everything. There's been a lot of issues with this vehicle.
And what would we do to replace that vehicle?
Well, we've got, Land Services has gotten rid of their piece of equipment to the Highway Department. So currently, they have a 2017 F-350 with 83,000 miles, which will take the place. So we don't have to go and find a vehicle. We just have to replace that Ford, that 2017 F-350 with something much more economical for Land Services before spring, because their work is pretty well done once the ground freezes up here.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the sale and payment to Northern Truck and Trailer for truck number 701, 2007 F-350 with approximately 145,000 miles.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. We have a motion and support. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, Brooke.
Appreciate it. All right, we will move on at this point to item number 9, Land Services, and we'll ask Neva Maxwell to come forward again. Thank you, Neva.
So this item is a conditional use permit that was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their October 16th meeting last month. It's regarding a cellular tower in Schroeder. As you may have experienced in your own life when you're in your car driving down Highway 61 and you're on a phone call, you may or may not have lost coverage in this area. It's just right next to the Lake County border. And so there's a little bit of a gap in the cellular coverage in our area. So the applicant is representing Vertical Bridge BTS LLC. Michael Beanick is here today, as well as his engineer, in case if there's any specific questions for them. This is a little bit of a complicated case, technically speaking, because of cellular tower and coverage. So I'm going to give you an overview of the Planning Commission meeting, and then Jay DeCou is here from the MIS department. And following the Planning Commission meeting, Jay and the MIS department submitted a memo in response to some of the comments that were made at the Planning Commission meeting. And so I distributed that to the applicant so that they could be aware that that would be presented to you today. And then the applicant also submitted a memo in response to the MIS memo. So there's a little bit of complexity, so I'm trying to structure this for you. So at the Planning Commission meeting, staff gave their overview, and the applicant gave a brief address to some of the comments that they wanted to make. And then the questions that the Planning Commission asked centered around whether or not if this tower could be located at a different location and also still provide coverage to Highway 61. And the applicant said that that wouldn't be feasible. I don't think feasible was the specific word that they used, but that it's not what their plan is, that they want this tower in this location to primarily focus on their coverage on Highway 61. The Planning Commission kind of asked a question of whether or not it could be located elsewhere to cover other areas of Schroeder. This specific township and range of Schroeder does have a lot of private property inland, which is unique compared to other areas of the North Shore of Cook County. But that wasn't the applicant's focus. They were really focused on the Highway 61 coverage. So that is what most of the Planning Commission discussion centered around. Ultimately, the Planning Commission did vote 5-1, I believe. One person was opposed to the approval of the cell tower. I think the main points of this, it does get pretty complex, but the main point is that the existing towers that are in the area are too far away to physically provide coverage to this location. This is a gap, a legitimate gap of cellular coverage. Cook County has adopted its own tower ordinance to regulate the location of towers, to limit the view shed. The ultimate vision of that tower ordinance when it was enacted is to provide the most coverage with the minimal infrastructure. So let's try to really be efficient with our tower utilities. The tower ordinance, I don't think, really foresaw a case like this, where an applicant comes in and they identify a very specific location and say, we want to provide this coverage right here. It was kind of making the base assumption that a tower would try to be efficient by providing coverage to a large area. So I'm perhaps getting too philosophical in that, but I'm trying to kind of provide some of the framework for the discussion that's to come. So the applicant has come in, they focus on this Highway 61 corridor. None of this tower would provide coverage over the ridge line, which includes Kramer Road, which is an area of a lot of private property in Schroeder. And so that is kind of the pinch point to what the MIS department is trying to say, is that this tower that's proposed is focusing on a very specific location. A tower located further up the ridge could potentially provide service to a greater area of private land in Schroeder. But the applicant is stating that we've identified this gap along Highway 61, and therefore we've satisfied the needs of the ordinance to say that this tower will provide coverage. And ultimately, the Planning Commission felt that the public safety benefit to having improved coverage along Highway 61 was a better benefit to have that tower in that location. So that was kind of the long and the short of it. There was one applicant, or one adjacent property owner who was concerned. He was a gentleman who has land that has easement to access this location. When I spoke with our MCIT attorney, Jay Squires, about this, he said that the existing easement is sufficient enough for the county to state that there is legal access to this tower. So that in of itself is not really a reason to say there's not legal access to the tower. And as you know, we don't get involved in other private property disputes into that. So that gentleman was present and spoke opposed to the request at the public hearing. So, and then if you want, Madam Chair, Jay is here, if you'd like him, Jay DeCou with our radio tower communications analyst, should you want him to weigh in further.
Thank you so much. Jay, if you'd be willing to come forward to the microphone, I imagine you have some comments you can share, and there may be some questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commission. I think that Ms. Maxwell puts it in a very succinct way as far as the concerns that were brought up by the radio communications analyst and MIS department in regards to the location of the tower itself. I won't disagree that the vertical bridge applicants have provided a great deal of information towards the approval of the application itself. However, in my review of the information, I do believe that I find it to be somewhat incomplete in regards to the verification of a statement that they made saying that it was impossible to locate the tower in a different location and accomplish the same goal. Now, with that said, the application that they have provided, I will also confirm that the application that they have provided is for a specific location and a specific coverage provided by a specific location, which they provided illustrations for. However, my job as the radio communications analyst puts me in charge of the ordinance, the tower ordinance itself, which the reading of the tower ordinance that I have seen, all of the communications that I have seen from county commissions in the past in regards to it, and in all the communications that I have had with people who are subject to it, including citizens in Cook County, say that the purpose of this is to consolidate the impact of infrastructure visually and land-wise for the county. And so with that said, an application of this nature is something we've never seen before, and it's something that falls outside of the specific limitations of the ordinance because it hasn't been identified that an applicant can choose the area of coverage. And so that is, that's something that's different for us. And so what I would encourage the commission to consider in this is the spirit of the ordinance itself. Why would the county choose to create communications districts where the limitations on locating towers and co-location are less if we did not intend to have those be the main backbone of communications across the county? And then does that spirit then also provide enough of a drive to require or to ask of applicants to cover the maximum amount with any infrastructure that they choose to install? So that is where I'm going with this. I will definitely, like I said before, I will acknowledge the work that the vertical bridge representatives have put into the application. The ordinance, I do believe, is very thorough in its consideration of this. If the commission does choose to go with the location that is suggested, my concern is that then the Kramer Road area on top of the ridge will be islanded. There will not be an easy way to address that growing population that lives in that area because of interference and also coverage that happens closer to the cell companies will likely say, hey, it's good enough. So that's my 2 cents. If you have any questions, I would definitely stand for questions.
Are there any questions? Commissioner White.
So, So this tower would be able to, it's for the location on Highway 61, and it would not, because of our hills, get over to Kramer Road. Is it 100% certain that there would be a site that would cover both the highway and the Kramer Road area?
Well, in my memo to the vertical bridge applicants, that was part of my point, was not necessarily to say, hey, look, I don't think that this should get approved. I do see the benefit of the public safety benefit in this area. This is a dead spot. I mean, like, we're all in agreement about that. Nobody's saying that it's not. However, there are locations, the ridge line is very flat going down by the lake, and then it goes up, and then it's flat again. And then it's got kind of like the lumpy stuff back on the ridge. And so I would like to see their engineering drawings that say they can't do it from there. Because when I have simple tools. I have tools that provide line of sight drawings, that show elevation from a side cut. And in the use of my tools, I can illustrate, and I put this in my memo, I illustrate that up on the ridge, you not only will get coverage inland, but also coverage down at the highway at the same level as you would at the proposed location. So all of that to be said, I know that the argument that Vertical Bridge holds in regards to that is that that's not the application. And that's, I do think there is consideration for that too. But I also think that the county commission has a lot of leeway when it comes to conditional uses, to make sure that what the conditional use that gets approved is the right one for the community.
Other questions for Jay? Commissioner Starling.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. It seemed like when I put all this together, it was kind of like a small Webster dictionary.
We covered a lot of ground, yeah.
I did drive, and it's in my district, so I did drive and kind of look around and see. The interesting thing about this is, if my understanding is right, that this is a private property owner who had connection with some folks in Boca Raton, Florida, to come and take care of their T-Mobile use. Now, it's a small area, and we all know when we go up and down the shore, there are blank spots, and we can't cover everybody's blank spot. So that's concern number one, that a private party has asked, right, for this to be put on their property, which is almost to the county line, up in the area there. And then some conversation that I've had with some concerned folks in the West End is that, is it really true that the top of the tower will not sit 700 feet below the horizon zone? Is that
I don't have the answer to that right off the top of my head. I think that would be a better question for the Vertical Bridge representatives.
Okay.
But what you're stating as far as, the infill of different dead spots is a definite concern of mine in regards to the ordinance. And because there are so many dead spots. And whether or not it's financially plausible that people will decide to, or the industry will ask to infill a lot of those locations that are dead spots, that's a good question. I honestly didn't see this one coming, but that's definitely a concern, and I believe a shortcoming of the ordinance.
Okay. And then there was a suggestion, rather than towers and all of that, would existing technologies cover something like mini towers, pole-mounted radios, other kinds of technology that would sort of fill in for that limited area?
I don't know the answer to that either. However, I would say that this location, I agree with the Vertical Bridge representatives that this location would be more suitable for a macro site like they're proposing versus a micro site or a mini site, which would be more of infill for like a municipality. That covers more in-building coverage and also covers a lot of the little corners that are created in municipal settings by thick walls running parallel to the signal, things like that. So one of the concerns that I do have too with the proposed location is that if the proposed location is identified and is seen as being the right location for this tower, I would like to see, because this is an application for one carrier, for T-Mobile to be on this site, what does it look like? What is the maximum height necessary to accomplish the goal? And I think that that's much shorter than 195 feet. So that's another way to look at it, and saying that the plan is clearly to co-locate. That's been called out in their application. However, this is an application from T-Mobile and Vertical Bridge for one cell carrier. What's the goal of that? The goal of that could be to get that coverage along that 3-mile stretch of Highway 61. If that's the case, does it have to be 195 feet tall? Because then that would impact the view shed of everyone in that area. So I know that view is going to be an issue no matter how we shake it. That's why our ordinance was created. That's why it's so much harder to put a 200-plus foot tower in our county.
So what would you suggest for a minimum height then?
Well, and see, I did off the back of the napkin calculations, and I wrote in my memo 140 feet. I went back and recalculated. I think 155 is more what the number would look like to accomplish the goals that the applicant is looking to accomplish with one cell carrier.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sullivan, could we hear from the two gentlemen in the back so they could talk to Jay and not, like when you say, could it be done at 155, is this exclusively for T-Mobile and it will not be usable for any other? Is this, I just need to, hadn't thought of any of this.
Attorney Hicken.
Yeah, thank you. I understand that request, and I understand Mr. Duku's request to speak here today. What I'm a little uncomfortable with is that the public hearing for this permit has passed, and all of the comments that the commissioner should consider should be within the envelope of the public hearing at that lower board level of the excuse me, the zoning commission or the board of adjustment. So the discussion here should be kind of narrowed to consider what's in your packet. And it's difficult to have the kind of back and forth, each side, surrounding property owners and the applicant have their chance to speak. All of that happens within the public hearing. So we don't have the members of the public here to respond who were at the public hearing on the issue. So this is hard
So
to bring it back up at this point.
Madam Attorney, can I interject?
First, I'm going to, Commissioner Johnson had her hand up.
Well, my question was for Neva.
Okay.
So when this was presented, it was reviewed, and it was 199 with T-Mobile at the top, and there were two other carriers listed in the board packet. This was really hard for me to understand. So I'm going to ask for your help in making sure I'm understanding what it was discussed and talked about. So T-Mobile, and they want two other carriers. I can't tell you off the top of my head, AT&T or somebody and somebody else, I don't know, doesn't matter. What height were those other two carriers at? Or that information?
Yeah. So that's a very technical question. My general understanding from talking through this with Jay, because my first question was, could a shorter tower work? Does this need to be a full-size tower? And the concept that I've understood broadly from a planning and zoning administrator role is that each carrier needs a certain space. So the best spot on the tower is the top, and you need a certain number of feet. And I would leave it to the people to the right of me over here to specifically say that amount. But you need a certain amount for the first carrier, and then the next best spot gets kind of out to the public. Hey guys, we got the next spot. Who wants this spot? And so the next carrier gets the next best spot, and then that third spot. So by the time you've gone down there, it's a certain amount of height that they all want coverage over.
And was that in this packet, and I just can't find it because I don't know what I'm looking for?
I don't know that, I mean, it might be in there technically. I don't know if the Planning Commission really discussed that in depth because we're understanding that this is intended to provide the carrier, the other carriers. That's a part of
Right.
the purpose of this tower. So they didn't really question that at all.
So I guess I'm wondering, and I'm not an engineer, and like I said, this is very difficult for me to understand. So I'm wondering, that third position down that helps pay to build this tower, how much coverage do they have, and was that on my view shed that I saw that I couldn't figure out? Was that information in there?
Commissioner Johnson, I'm not smart enough to know the answer to that, frankly. I'm not a radio tower engineer. So I would defer to either Jay, probably see if Jay has a better answer to that than I do.
And this is where I wish maybe this had been discussed at the Planning Commission level and in a way that I can understand all this information, so that's just.
Madam Chair, one of the options before you when we're in these cases, and I neglected to put that clearly in this report, but you have the option to remand this back to the Planning Commission. Procedurally, that might be the cleanest way to handle this, is stipulate what information is still missing, or what do you want the Planning Commission to really, talk about, to really get the facts straight, and bring you back a better set of information. So that if they still recommend approval, it's based off of these questions of yours being answered. Or if they change their mind and they recommend denial, it's based off of the answers to these questions and these ordinance findings. So that might be a better way so that the commissioners themselves aren't trying to do the Planning Commission's legwork on this. Like I said, some of these questions, this is, like Attorney Hickens said, we try to keep this record really clean, but it's also our job as staff to be sure that we're dealing with accuracy and facts. So that's why some of these later memos got pulled into what is normally a little bit of a more streamlined process.
Thank you. Commissioner White.
To Jay, what's the we don't need to isolate anymore the Kramer Road as it already is. What's the viability of another carrier coming in and saying, oh, let's just put one for the Kramer Road people? I mean, to construct a tower is a huge investment. And so if there is one down on the shore, would that probably be not as feasible to have someone else come in and put up another tower, which we don't want towers all over the place, I get that. So would the property owners, that's one question. The second one was, the private property owners heading up where there might be another location to site a tower that would cover the highway and cover some of Kramer Road population, would they be in favor of that? Do you have people that want a tower on their land? It's just, no one has the answer to it.
Yeah, and I would be very hesitant to speak for the industry or anything like that as far as coverage potential for different areas. I understand, the cellular bands enough to know that if you have a number of different towers in the same small geographic area, you run the risk of running into interference with them because they all have to run compatible bands so that they don't fight each other with the signal. I don't know what it would look like down there. I haven't done any kind of study as far as over the hill, what that looks like. So I don't have an answer to that. I do know that towers are a business, and so if there's a profit to be had from a potential installation, then it's got a pretty good chance of happening. If there's perceived profit from it. I'm not certain what the answer to those questions is, though.
I would like to give the applicants an opportunity to respond to Jay's remarks. So maybe if you could put the microphone between perhaps the two of you,
Certainly. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Bienick. I'm with a company called LCC Telecom Services. We are located at 10700 West Higgins Road, Suite 240 in Rosemont, Illinois. And we represent both Vertical Bridge and T-Mobile. And with me today is Josh Matthews. He is the radio frequency engineer with T-Mobile. Now, one of the items, and I'll let him address all the coverage and whatnot, all those types of things. You had mentioned that a company from Boca Raton was building this tower. Yes, that is how the industry works. What happens is T-Mobile puts out what's called a search ring. They say, okay, this is the area that we need to provide coverage for this area. They hire a tower company. They don't build their own towers typically, so they'll hire a tower company. In this case, they hired Vertical Bridge. Vertical Bridge in turn hired us to do the site acquisition for this tower with the confines of where that search ring is located. The search ring was down along Highway 61, Voyager Highway, with the main purpose of this tower to provide connectivity to the two towers that are located along there. There's one approximately 6.3 miles south in Lake County. That tower is owned by American Tower, and then there's one north of there that is approximately the same type of distance, about 6.8 miles north, and that tower is owned by SBA Communications. And so what they proposed was to infill this coverage gap, and this was a big issue that was discussed in the Plan Commission. In fact, one of the Plan Commissioners brought up the fact that he drives back and forth past this area on his way to work, and one of the things, he's generally on the phone, and he tells the people, I gotta go. I'm gonna lose coverage when I get this area. I also experienced it. I was out when I was looking at the search ring at the onset. We got caught in a blizzard, and I had turned off on a side, and I got stuck on ice. And had it been a real emergency, I could not use my phone. There is zero coverage. Now, as far as the 195 feet, this is very important, because if you go down to 140 feet, and that's even in, and Mr. Matthews can explain why it doesn't work, but even if it was, your next carrier is going to be about 10 to 15 feet below that. So you're at like 125 and 110 for the next carriers to come along. In an urban area, that would work, but this is obviously a very rural area, so the next carriers probably aren't going to use that tower, and they're going to need to build more towers. So by getting the 195 feet, you could have the next carriers. One of the items that was addressed by the emergency management in this area was the need for coverage. That's the whole point of this. It's to cover along the highway. There's quite a bit of traffic that goes from Duluth on up north, so there's a very big need. And not only that, with emergency management, one of the items they addressed was FirstNet, and that's not a T-Mobile service, that's an AT&T service. AT&T is actually on both of the other towers. So the likelihood of them coming to this tower once it is built is very high. And so if they were forced to go at the 120 level, plus or minus, it probably wouldn't be worth their while doing it. So at the taller height, it allows them to do that. Now, as far as back in the Kramer Road area, there's some technical problems that come into play. The highway is down the hill, so it would be, some of that signal will be shadowed, not to mention it's approximately 5 miles back up the hill to get to where the Kramer Road area is. And what happens is the coverage area is approximately 3 to 6 miles. You'd be almost missing the coverage area that we're trying to cover. So those are some of the highlights that I wanted to put forth. I'll turn it over to Mr. Matthews to elaborate on his.
Good morning. My name is Joshua Matthews. I work for T-Mobile USA. We're at 8000 West 78th Street in Edina, Minnesota, 55337. I am a senior RF engineer at T-Mobile. I've been doing site designs and upgrades for 27 years. I've been involved in literally thousands of new site designs and upgrades over that period of time. I am the one that Mike described, the search ring, the initial area in which we are looking for new site development. I issued that initial plan and have evaluated all the candidate properties that were given to us for viability, and then we settled on the one that we are presenting today. I think Mike did an excellent job of outlining many of the issues here today. I'm going to follow up on 2 points. At no point have we officially analyzed any property higher up on the ridge. Those candidates were never initially consulted because of the quality of the ones that we received initially. Locating up higher on the ridge is true, would have a higher ground elevation combined with the height of the tower, would serve a larger area, including possibly the area, Kramer Road area, as well as Highway 61. However, there are some issues with locating higher on that ridge. We don't know if there's any landowners that would be willing to lease ground to us. I don't think that there would be power or fiber optic available in that area. I think all of those utilities run along Highway 61. And obviously, the further we are from those existing structures, the more expensive and difficult it is for us to move power and connectivity to wherever our site would be located. Yeah, I think that kind of sums up. If you have any technical questions, I'll be happy to assist with those.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Storley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple questions to Jay and to Commissioner White's point about how many towers do we have in Cook County?
Just so they can hear me. I actually was just pulling that up. I have a tool that I've built in conjunction with our GIS specialist that shows locations of all known towers in the county. And I would say ballpark, if you include privately held towers, defunct towers, and county, state, federal, those sorts of towers, I'd say there's probably a ballpark of 30, 35, something in that neighborhood. Across the entire county, though, mind you. So, and these include some of the little ones. So I have on my map, I have the little 60-foot tower that's up at the Seagull Guard Station. Things like that we don't really think of when we think of large communication towers, because they wouldn't be possible to co-locate like a lot of equipment there.
Is it usual to have a tower on private property?
Is it usual to have a tower on private property? Well, I guess there's two different ways to answer that question. The first question is the tower ordinance was put in place in 2008, which was before most of our actual weight-bearing towers were developed. And that was prior to the armor system. The armor system was a big kick in the pants for the county to build more towers and to create the partnerships possible to make sure that those were financially feasible. So before the ordinance was put in place, there were not a lot of towers. There were a couple of great big television and telephone towers, which are now part of our backbone. But post-ordinance, the drive has always been for co-location. So most of those towers are either privately owned towers on county-owned land, or they're privately owned towers on county-owned land, or publicly owned towers on county-owned land. Typically, there's a public element in a lot of the towers. However, elsewhere in the state and country, I do believe that that's a lot more normal to have privately owned towers on private land. A lot of times, the lease arrangements for those types of towers turn out to be beneficial for both parties. So
I just find it interesting when I drove around and up in the property that the companies found this little piece of land and contacted the folks who own that land. I find the process really interesting.
I can explain it if you
Yes,
like.
if you would.
Okay, so as I mentioned at the onset, we get this search ring. So what our company does, we do the site acquisition. I personally am responsible for handling the zoning portion. So what we do is we take that search ring, we plot it out on a map. I do a zoning analysis to see what regulations, what the setbacks, the height requirements, and all that kind of details. And then our site acquisition people, what they do is they take the county's GIS map, and they plot out all those property owners that live within that search ring. And then once we get that, we obviously determine, okay, so this parcel over here can't work, it's zoned residential, or whatever the case may be. But in this case, obviously, it was all pretty much zoned agriculture. What is it, FR?
AR1.
FAR1, yeah. So all the entire search ring was pretty much open. And so what we did was we took that GIS map and we sent out letters to each of the property owners within that search area. And we said, would you be interested in leasing out space for a tower? In this case, to your point about publicly owned property, there was none in this area. So it had to be a privately owned parcel. And what we do is we provide candidates, as Mr. Matthews had mentioned, and he selects which one will work best within his network. And that's how we came to choosing the lot that we did, and we did a lease agreement with Mr. Evans, Mr. and Mrs. Evans on this property, and that's how we came to that property.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So other things that we should be thinking about or discussing? I know one of the things I am thinking about, and I had an opportunity to be at the Planning Commission meeting where this was discussed, is I'm concerned a little bit about whether this really fits the character of the area. The Superior Hiking Trail goes through this area, and I know that there were remarks about camouflaging the tower, but I also know that it's a very open area. I looked at pictures provided by Ms. Maxwell of the hardwood deciduous forest that's there. It's very different than what was described in the initial documents provided to the commission. So I have a question about that, and then I also am concerned about the size of the service area being so small. I do agree that there is a need for communication in that area, but because of what I see on the Planning Commission, because of discussions in the community about the development of Kramer Road, I would like to see an analysis of a location that might benefit both of those areas. Neva.
If I may, Madam Chair, as you're making your considerations, I just wanted to say, procedurally speaking, the county does have a timeline for processing these applications. So we'll be at the 120-day mark where the county needs to make a decision by December 20th.
Mm-hmm.
The applicant does have the right to waive that, but we would want that in writing if this was to be going closer to that date for any decisions.
Thank you for clarifying that. Other comments or questions that commissioners might have? Commissioner White.
Well, I believe that, because now we have a new dead zone along Highway 61, leave Grand Marais and head to Grand Portage, and the whole, I get nothing anymore. Nothing. It used to be a spot or two, and nothing at least to Highway, or to County Road 69. Like, brand new thing that just happened 2 weeks ago. Nothing. Don't know what. So, but it's a heavily traveled, not as much as going towards Tofty and down the road that way. But is our primary concern. I mean, aesthetics are important, we get that, but the safety of the people that live and travel in this community, we've spent a lot of money on emergency services, and I believe that the safety of our people is paramount to trees. I'm going to get letters on this one. But, it has to be in balance. It has to be in balance. And a tree comes back, but if you have a bad accident on Highway 61 going down where the ditch goes straight down, we know what those roads are like, that road is like. I believe having coverage on Highway 61 is pretty darn important. But I will go to what Neva has said, that we should send it back with what Jay has brought up, with what the procedure is from our attorney because of the hearing process, and to just review what we've discussed here and the different considerations. And I understand a tower is a business investment, and so those concerns need to be considered also. Should it be not fiscally viable for this company, for T-Mobile, AT&T, for them to put a tower someplace else, then is it better to not have any towers? It's rhetorical. I don't know. So I don't believe we are, as Attorney Higgins has said, we are not in a position to make a decision today on this.
Madam Chair, if you do remand us back, I would request that you could potentially provide me with a list of items that you want addressed so that we can make sure that we hit every item that you're asking questions about, so that we're not going through this again where, well, we didn't address X, Y, and Z. So if you could, please, that would be very helpful.
Precisely. So let's all talk about right now what those questions might be. So I brought up a question about the character of the area. I do agree that public safety is paramount, that we also need to look at service. I would just like to see that we also have an opportunity to potentially include people up the Kramer Road, that maybe with a different location, we could deal with both of those issues. But I agree with the public safety being the priority. Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, I think I appreciate the work that's being done to bring coverage into the areas that doesn't have it, but I feel like this application is against the spirit of our ordinance, trying to consolidate and get, best coverage with minimal infrastructure. And so I would ask to look at other areas. I feel like if we approve this one, it would shoot ourselves in the foot to get coverage up near the Kramer Road. And so I would ask to look at areas that have that broader coverage. And that really is what the spirit of the ordinance is all about, is minimizing the infrastructure and getting more coverage. The highway, absolutely, because that's where all the traffic is. But then the residences up beyond, because we want coverage throughout. So that's kind of my take on it. And I would also, suggest that the Planning Commission look at that in consideration. I know there was some of it, but I know there's time constraints too. So I just feel like there's a lot more conversation that needs to be had. I don't know if everyone, I guess, people were involved in varying degrees back when the tower ordinance was put into effect, but there was quite the public process there and input. And I think the weight of this kind of infrastructure deserves more discussion.
I would agree with you. Commissioner Storley.
Could this be put on the November agenda for planning?
Tomorrow is the November Planning Commission meeting. So technically, it could go on as old business. And I think that if it's a matter of discussion, I think it just depends on how technical of additional information you're requesting from the applicant and what their capacity is to respond to that. Or likewise, like I said, if they're willing to put in writing that they waive that 120-day timeline, then they could go on the December Planning Commission meeting. And that would be okay also.
Eva, what about a special meeting at the Planning Commission? Do they do that?
Not with Thanksgiving coming up.
Ah, true.
Commissioner Mills?
Specifically, I'd like to learn more about the shadow that you talked about by having a tower further back. Like, that seems very strange to me considering all our other coverages along the highway. The towers up in Old Ski Hill Road in Grand Marais, those are up on top of the ridge and cover all of that shoreline. So I'm just not understanding that. And I'd like to learn more about that as well as, like I said, inland, looking at that, because my concern is we put this tower here, but then it interferes with another tower or interferes with the plausibility of another tower. It's just economically. So I'm really trying to get quality product that's going to serve the public the most.
Absolutely.
And in response to that, I mean, I don't have an answer to that question, Commissioner Mills, but I also, these are the types of conversations that I wanted to have happen at the Planning Commission. Like in my memo, the first paragraph of my memo was, I didn't feel like we had enough time. I felt like it was like the conversation was truncated due to time. And I'm good. I'm glad he's nodding his head too, because I think that a lot of this could have been hashed out if we just had more time in the Planning Commission itself. So with that said, I mean, I'm just going to leave that hanging out there because I would have loved to have time in the Planning Commission with the Planning Commission to respond and to have a lot of these conversations there during the public hearing at that meeting instead of having it happen here, because then we kind of are graying the lines of where this information is supposed to be popping in. So that's me.
No, I fully agree. When I went to make the presentation, I was told that we've talked about towers enough, let's move on. So we didn't get to really address everything, unfortunately. Josh has a question about the location.
There seems to be a lot of questions about the possibility of alternative locations. And I want to address that. I can certainly analyze and look at any location. It's just a dot on a map, and I can simulate.
Do you need a
towers
specific
there.
location to look for, or can we give you criteria to look for locations?
Either could be viable.
Okay.
Do you understand what our goal is then?
I do understand what your
Okay.
goal is.
Good.
My issue is that there's a significant difference between looking at a theoretical location and having that actually be viable. I can draw a dot on a map that would cover Kramer Road, would cover Highway 61, assuming there is such a location, but the landowner isn't interested. Or it'll cost us $1 million to plow in power, which makes it non-viable in any scenario.
You have to have access to the site.
Sure, but these are, what I'm hearing is you just don't know, right?
Right.
So
No.
that's the hard work. We got to find that out.
Therein lies the rub, right? Our application before you today is for a specific property that we are perfectly fine with moving forward. We have analyzed it, we've looked at it, it meets all of our criteria, it'll hit all of our coverage goals, filling, the 12-mile separation between the other two towers. We're 6.3 miles to one and 6.1 to the other. It's almost dead in the middle, which is where I drew the circle. So what I'm afraid of happening is that we go to a planning commission, we look at a map of a theoretical site, everybody says, that looks great, and then this application dies in favor of something that doesn't yet exist. And that sets us back 6 months, a year, or more.
And that also includes, the theoreticals also includes the fact that we have to do NEPA, SHPO, FCC, FAA approvals, not to mention the soil conditions on this theoretical parcel may not work. They may not support a tower, where this has already been done on this site. So it's really difficult to come back in such a short period of time
We got to play the long game here. Like, I'm glad it works for you guys, but we need to make sure it works for the public, right? We need to make sure it works for as many people as possible.
Understood, and Kramer Road is approximately 5 miles away, so the potential of 2 towers
Baldur and Isengard
is a possibility. I mean, it really is. I mean, unfortunately, the map that Mr. DeCoux provided that the county originally came up with, the closest tower that's in that overlay is approximately 20 miles away. It's further north of the tower that they're connecting to. And the typical coverage radius is 3 to 6 miles. So 20 miles away to go to a tower isn't gonna, it's like spitting in the ocean. It won't do anything. So we're in a lot of theoreticals here that I don't think we can give you answers because I don't know what the soil is like. NEPA could come back and find that there's arrowheads all over the place up there. Who knows? We don't know that without, and NEPAs take like 6 to 9 months. It depends. I mean, it's just.
Is that a problem?
Very much so, yes.
Can you explain the timeline for you guys?
They're looking to build probably in the spring.
But I mean, so as I've expressed, we're looking for the long game for the benefit as many people for the public as possible. And so we want to make sure we do it right, not just that it's convenient and cheap, right?
No, I'm not saying it's convenient or cheap. I'm just saying that we have an application in front of the county based on being able to meet all the criteria in your zoning ordinance, which we do, and we have provided.
The spirit, though, I think that's what we're,
I have a question, Commissioner. I have a question. If we have an ordinance, are we but they're not meeting the spirit? It's not their point to meet the spirit. They're meeting the what is in the policy. They're meeting all of the criteria. For them to have to know what the spirit of the writing of that ordinance was, it's not sensible. It's for whomever wrote the ordinance, and I'm not criticizing. It should have been more clear perhaps then, but if they are meeting all of the criteria, you can't fault them. And as I said, building a tower and all of the footwork that goes into it has to be really expensive. I mean, it's expensive if you're just going to build a house. You're going to have to do soils, wetlands, all of this. And a tower is even more. And so I don't think it's the fault of...
No, it's nobody's fault.
It's not a fault, but if they've met all of the criteria, is the onus on us for not having it stated more clearly? That we...
Well, this is a collaboration. This is a partnership.
Right.
And so it's a back and forth, and we got to work together to get this done. I think they understand what we want to get done.
Yes.
Do we understand what we want to get done? Are we here for the most coverage and for as many public, or what's our, that's...
For the safety of
Right, as many people as we can, yeah.
Yes.
Attorney Kick.
I hesitate to add to this conversation and just add more complication. First of all, I want to endorse what Commissioner White just said here, which is that it is the language in the ordinance that will always control in a court over the spirit of the ordinance. And so if an applicant is following the language, that, we need to honor our side of the bargain on that ordinance. I also want to remind everyone of the scope of this conversation. This is a single application by a single property owner, and we are, this body is the decision maker. The Planning Commission, at the Planning Commission, there was a quasi-judicial process in which both sides got to give their comments on the application. You had members of the public. You had Mr. DeCoux was there. This one representative for this applicant was here. And what the courts, what the law says about limiting people's property rights is that you need to have that quasi-judicial process in order to provide them due process. If we're going to tell a property owner, you can't do this on your land, then we need to follow that process that we've established. And in this county, as in most counties, what the Board of Commissioners has decided is that there needs to be a planning commission in order to hold that process and bring their recommendation to the board. The board, it's not a, you have not delegated all authority to that board, but you have delegated the responsibility of running the process. And so by reopening that process, that hearing, that record here, that's what I'm uncomfortable with. I'm also a bit uncomfortable with talking about this as if the applicant's priorities should be the same as the county's priorities of, getting the most coverage. The county could be seeking a piece of property and building a tower for the purpose of creating the most coverage, but that's not naturally going to be the priority of this single property owner, of this parcel on the west end of the county. So
We do have, many of our partnerships are based on that, though, and my understanding of the ordinance, that's how I got the spirit of the ordinance.
But is this a partnership, or is this a property owner requesting to exercise their property rights?
I like to have partnerships. In this particular case, it's all private. My fear is that, like I said, it'll be shooting us in the foot and limiting other potential coverages. And so that was one of the things that I'm asking to look at, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in which case, if it is very expensive, then there can be partnership there. I'm very happy with the technical expertise that you bring to the table, and I want to make something work. This location, I think, needs more discussion, and I think there are some shortcomings there. Just as far as priorities are concerned, and what the ramifications are inland. But
Ms. Maxwell had her hand up.
I don't know if this helps or hurts the complexity of the conversation, but with Attorney Hicken and Commissioner Mills' discussion there, I did want to point out that within the findings for the conditional use permit for the tower, as written in the tower ordinance, item K is stated as, it recognizes that the proposed facility will be constructed with the best interests of Cook County in mind. So the written findings for the CUP did to some extent ask for these towers to be thought of for the Cook County's interest, which kind of adds a little complexity, I think. I just wanted to note that.
So my thought is that if Vertical Bridge is willing to give some additional time so we can send this back to the Planning Commission to get these questions answered, is that something you would be willing to do?
It depends. I can answer, but it's not necessarily 100% up to me. I mean, we've already extended it once. And I'm sure they feel we've addressed, because I've kept my project manager at Vertical Bridge in the loop the whole way, that we have addressed all the criteria in the zoning ordinance. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if we start going down this path of looking at parcels, we could be another 9-10 months before we could even be able to come back to the Plan Commission. And that's not a reasonable time frame for what they feel and I feel is a good, solid application. So I don't know. I mean, unfortunately, we have Thanksgiving in here. Otherwise, I would say it would be easy to have a special Plan Commission meeting. I'd, be back for that, and then we talk about it in December before this board again. But I don't think that's going to happen.
I think it is feasible to have it on the agenda tomorrow as a old business item for the Planning Commission, because I think both parties agree that it was a truncated discussion, and the county board could ask the Planning Commission just to flesh out the discussion, don't rush it, and really think through, go finding by finding, And after going through the actual findings listed in the tower ordinance and the zoning ordinance, do your review. Give it a little bit more time. Again, that will be tomorrow, and there won't be any new information provided other than the 2 memos that were submitted to you that the Planning Commission did not see. And maybe with those 2 additional memos, the Planning Commission can think through those findings a little bit more clear. As I said before, this was not a unanimous decision by the Planning Commission. They also had a little difficulty in reviewing this. And then it could be before you on the first meeting in December that would meet that 120-day deadline.
That's what I was going to ask, yeah. I have a zoning, at what time? It's 4 o'clock?
Yep.
I have a zoning hearing in Douglas County in Superior, so I could easily be available to come back tomorrow. So I have no problem if you remand it back to the Plan Commission. We won't worry about the 120 days at this point. That will also give me an opportunity to talk to Vertical Bridge and let them know what your thoughts are. And, I can get some guidance from my project manager, what she thinks of, going on this Kramer Road analysis and, and we can bring that up with the Plan Commission. And obviously, Mr. DeCoux and Ms. Maxwell know obviously what the discussion is and the direction you're leaning.
I think that would be acceptable. Would other commissioners agree to that?
As long as it's in December, I guess I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I don't want to, we don't want to stretch this out any longer.
I do have a question. Why have we had to extend it already?
So it's just a part of the actual timelines. So the application was submitted August 22nd. We have an initial 60 days to do that review. The county has the right to extend that deadline an additional 60 days. We just need to cite the timing. So it was the nature of the Planning Commission meeting was October 16th. That county board meeting was the next week after that. I did not have time to get it on the agenda by the deadline. The deadline to get it on your agenda was before the Planning Commission meeting, and then this meeting was later than normal, too. Just weird timelines between the Planning Commission and the county board meeting. And so we've got a full 160 days to make a decision, and that would land on December 20th. And you have a meeting the first week of December, right?
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think we should make a motion.
Yeah, I make the motion to send it back to the Planning Commission for discussion of all of the items in the ordinance and their findings on that. Really appreciate you being available for that, and I really hope that we can get something that's going to benefit us all.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we're looking at the alternative of possibly the Kramer Road area. That's what I'm supposed we're supposed to be looking at.
The ability to cover both.
Correct.
If it's possible.
Right.
And I also heard in that discussion, some discussion about the shadow, to
Shadow.
clarify the
I'd like
shadow.
to
Maybe that's
Make sure that
one
we
and the same.
still have coverage on 61, correct. So we have a motion. Do we have support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it very much.
We'll see you tomorrow.
All right.
All right. So we will move on to item 10, Human Resources, and Allison Plummer, our director, is here to talk about approval of job descriptions and job grades.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, today I am bringing forth 2 job descriptions. These have gone through our job description review process with DDA, that ongoing process that we're hoping to wrap up at the end of this year. The 2 job descriptions I will list here for you. We have the Human Resource Generalist. It includes an updated job description. The job grade will remain at a 170. And then we also have our Land Services Director. That is also an updated job description with the job grade remaining at a 240.
Are there any questions for Allison?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the job descriptions for the Human Resources Generalist as well as the Land Service Director.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Mills, is there support? Support. Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Attorney Hicken.
Thank you. All right. Let me get to it. Sorry for the delay. It's going to be a very long meeting, I think, already. Okay. So what I have before you in my two items under the attorney category here are both related to the North Shore Waste Transfer Station, which is really a county-owned transfer station, which we anticipate will be operated by North Shore Waste. As you know, you've seen this project in several different forms and had information at different points. At the last meeting, where this project was addressed, the board approved up to $200,000 for design plans. And that is what is covered in item A. So this is an architect agreement before you for your consideration. It's been bounced back and forth a few times between myself, North Shore Waste, and the architect firm to make sure it meets everybody's needs. There's still one minor correction, which is just the wrong zip code. So I'm going to have to use a pen to actually mark that out instead of my computer before it gets signed if you approve it today. So the idea behind this contract is to come back with a design so we know more about the scope of this project, how much it will cost, what it will cost to hire a construction manager. As you're aware, there are still some gaps in funding from the anticipated cost to build the transfer station. If it's okay, I'd just like to quickly address item B also. This is much more simple. But part of the funding is a $450,000 grant from IRRR through the EDA. And so the EDA is the pass-through organization in order for them to give us the money and in this case, we're the developer. That's how we're described. We're also the owner of the project, obviously, but we're promising the EDA that we will abide by the terms of the grant agreement that the EDA has signed with the IRRR. The timeline is in my opinion, the most relevant thing for us to consider here. If you read the development agreement, you saw that we need to begin construction April 30th or before. There might be some flexibility in that. I think that Arena Rogers is trying to get a little more flexibility for that timeline. But essentially, we need a shovel to hit the ground. We need some action on this project by April 30th of next year. And that's going to require us to push. So as more items come up on this project, we'll want to keep them moving through the board process, keep moving towards construction as best we can, even after my departure. So I thought I should point that out and mention it.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Attorney Hicken? Commissioner White?
Yes. One doesn't usually break ground or plan on breaking ground in April in Cook County. I mean, it could be June. I mean, so is there a caveat in there? I mean, with weather permitting, with frost being gone permitting?
There's no caveat built into the grant agreement. No. Oh, Rowan has some information.
Talking with North Shore Waste, they mentioned something even as simple as starting the process to bring utilities to the site would would qualify. So I think something along those lines that could happen in that time frame.
A lot of site prep work has already been done on the site, so it is in some ways construction ready. But yeah, that, a step like that could satisfy this requirement. So that's why I'm coming to the board and advising you it's okay to sign this one with that timeline.
Other questions, comments? All right, so let's take
Yep.
first item A.
I'll make a motion to approve the agreement with R.W. Fern and Associates for architectural services to obtain plans for the county-owned transfer station to be operated by North Shore Waste.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
I'll support that.
Thank you, Commissioner White. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And then item B, which is the development agreement with Cook County Grand Marais EDA for the grant funding.
I'll make a motion to approve the development agreement between the county and the EDA for the transfer station project.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and a support. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And our last item on our morning session, Auditor Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is related to what you just spoke about. What we have is a requirement to obligate state and local funds. This is some of our ARPA funding. So just to clarify, we received two fundings on the American Recovery Plan. This is the first one that we received, the state and local fiscal recovery funds. A year later, we received some of the second funding, which was actually $2 million altogether, and that was the Local Assistance Tribal Consistency Fund, which was much simpler. That second funding does not have an end date and does not have any specific requirements as to use. General government allowed use on that second funding. On this one, we have specific uses, and it has to be obligated by the end of the year. And obligated can mean a contract, or it could be, if we had a subrecipient, have a subrecipient agreement, as we have had for some funding with HRA. And $500,000 has gone to the HRA through this and a subrecipient. So the total on this one is $1,061,124 that we received on the plan. We're also required to allocate interest to it. So we actually have accumulated more funds since we've allocated interest towards this. And with the two, it's a total of $1,279,606. We'll have to allocate some interest for 2024. We don't have that calculated yet. Actually goes through the end of the year. So at this point, we've spent $726,000, as you can see there, $500 for the HRA already, and the rest for public health, human services, pandemic response, et cetera. There was $150 allocated to Arrowhead Electric for broadband, the last mile, but they don't need it, and I confirmed that with them again recently. So that leaves us with $553 right now that we need to allocate or lose. We have to send it back if we don't obligate it. So what we need to do is to make that obligation. Some requirements into this are less strict than they were originally. We had very strict categories at that time, and it's opened up a little bit. So some of the options that I see right now, we could obligate for the design costs for the law enforcement center. This is what the work that BKV has done. We've approved that. They've given us an estimate of the costs, proposed fee for $655,321, and which would cover the remaining costs on this grant. Another option is to obligate these funds to the North Shore Waste Transfer Station with the architectural services, which we just approved for $200,000. So Third option then is HRA, as we have been using them as a subrecipient. And talking to Jason Hale, they've got projects right now. They've got one called the Nora Skogan Housing Development. They have additional needs for envelope and energy improvement program and funds that could ensure rents at Gunflint View to keep them at 60% of the AMI for 11 units. Yeah, I don't know what that would take to, but in this case, we would make a sub-recipient. We wouldn't need to know all of the details. We just have to obligate that we would spend the money that way with them as a sub-recipient. So I don't know that you have to make a decision on how to use. You may have other ideas too for the use of these, but we need to do it at this meeting, the next meeting, or the first meeting in December. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, it's really good information, I think, for us to have, particularly as we go into our budget discussion this afternoon. So I appreciate getting this morning so that we can be thinking about that as we look at other items,
Yeah.
as we have discussion with our department heads.
And what it would save on our end would be the normal for a project, a building project with BKV, those design funds, that would be part of your bonding cost. And so if you use that money for this, that would just reduce the bonding costs for that project. And the North Shore Waste is just to come from our transfer station funds that we've saved for Tim Nelson's possible projects in the building fund. So that would take some pressure off the building fund. And of course, housing projects. So you've got three really good options.
And we can do a combination.
You can do
of
a
those three.
combination.
That's
Yeah.
the important thing.
And Jason asked if anybody has any questions about those projects that he's proposed here, and I'll get those questions back to him, hopefully before he leaves. So,
All right. Thank you so much.
thanks.
Commissioner Mills.
And there's more options beyond these three, right? You said there's pretty wide latitude about what we can use things for, so I'm just thinking about some of the other requests that we have from this past, or for next year's budget.
That we could use for our budget purposes.
Mhm.
Give me an example, and I'll look at it.
An example would be, say, planning for the Sawtooth Bluffs.
That's the amount that's in the budget is a fairly small amount.
Mhm.
And we have a good source of funds for that right now, is the Parks and Rec money that we're collecting. And I guess I would opt for that.
Gotcha.
Because that is not being used, it's not in the budget right now. And being a small amount, I think that'd be a simple way to do that one.
And in the past, we've used ARPA funds to kind of on-ramp the comp study. Could we use these funds for similar buffering of the levy?
I'm not sure, because it says to obligate.
Gotcha.
And I'm not sure
Yep.
a
Gotta
wish to, yeah.
define it, yep.
Yeah, I think it
Gotcha.
has to be more defined.
Thank you.
They've made some concessions on this first one, but my sense is that would not meet their guidelines.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Brady? All right, well, if not, I think we'll take a motion to recess until 1:00 PM this afternoon. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support to go into recess. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll see you back here at 1:00. Thank you.